It was the first time I had heard of any of these things. My parents had not been Zionists. To me, Zion was a sacred ideal, a messianic hope, a prayer, a heartbeat, but not a place on the map or a political slogan, a cause for which men killed and died. Gad's stories were utterly fascinating. I saw in him a prince of Jewish history, a legendary messenger sent by fate to awaken my imagination, to tell the people whose past was now their religion, come, come, the future is waiting for you with open arms. From now on, you will no longer be humiliated, persecuted, or even pitied. You will not be strangers encamped in an age and a place that are not yours. Come, brothers, come. Gad stopped talking, and we went to look out the window at the approaching dawn. The shadows melted away, and a pale, prematurely weary light, the color of stagnant water, invaded my small room. I accept your offer, I said. I said it so softly that Gad seemed not to hear. He remained standing by the window, and after a moment of silence, turned around to say, "Here is the dawn. In our land, it is very different. Here the dawn is gray. In Palestine, it is red like fire." "I accept, Gad," I repeated. "I heard you," he said with a smile, the color of Paris dawn. "You'll be leaving in 3 weeks." The autumn breeze blowing in through the window made me shiver. 3 weeks, I reflected, before I plunge into the unknown. Perhaps my shiver was caused not so much by the breeze as by this reflection. I believe that even unconsciously, I knew at the end of the road I was to travel with Gad, a man was waiting, a man who would be called upon to kill another man, myself. Radio Jerusalem, last minute news flashes. David Ben Moshe's execution will take place at dawn tomorrow. The High Commissioner has issued an appeal for calm, curfew at 9 o'clock. No one will be allowed on the streets. I repeat, no one will be allowed on the streets. The army has orders to shoot on sight. The announcer's voice betrayed his emotion. As he said the name David Ben Moshe, there must have been tears in his eyes. All over the world, the young Jewish fighter was the hero of the day. All the wartime resistance movements of Europe held rallies in front of the British embassies. The chief rabbis of their capital cities sent a joint petition to His Majesty the King. Their telegram, with some 30 signatures at the bottom, ran, "Do not hang a young man whose only crime is fidelity to his ideal." A Jewish delegation was received at the White House, and the president promised to intercede. That day, the heart of humanity was one with that of David Ben Moshe. It was 8 o'clock in the evening and completely dark. Gad switched on the light. Outside, the child was still crying. "The dirty dog," said Gad, "they're going to hang him." His face and his hands were red and perspiring. He paced up and down the room, lighting one cigarette after another, only to throw each one away. "They're going to hang him," he repeated. "The bastards." The news broadcast came to an end, and a program of choral singing followed. I started to turn the radio off, but Gad held me back. "It's 8:15, he said. "See if you can get our station." I was too nervous to turn the dial. "I'll find it," said Gad. The broadcast had just begun. The announcer was a girl with a resonant, grave voice familiar to every one of us. Every evening at this hour, women, men, and children paused their work or play to listen to the vibrant, mysterious voice, which always began with the same 8 words. "You are listening to the voice of freedom." The Jews of Palestine loved this girl or young woman without knowing who she was. The English would have given anything to lay hands upon her. In their eyes, she was as dangerous as the old man. She too was part of the legend. Only a very few people, no more than 5, knew her identity, and Gad and I were among them. Her name was Ilana. She and Gad were in love, and I was a friend to both of them. Their love was an essential part of my life. I needed to know that there was such a thing as love, and that it brought smiles and joy in its wake. "You are listening to the voice of freedom," Ilana repeated. Gad's dark face quivered. He was bent almost double over the radio, as if he wanted to touch with his hands and eyes the clear, deeply moving voice of Ilana, which tonight was his voice and mine, and that of the whole country. "2 men are preparing to meet death at dawn tomorrow," said Ilana, as if she were reading a message from the Bible. "One of them deserves our admiration, the other our pity. Our brother and guide, David Ben Moshe, knows why he is dying. John Dawson does not know. Both of them are vigorous and intelligent and on the threshold of life and happiness. They might have been friends, but now this can never be. At dawn tomorrow, the same hour, the same minute, they will die, but not together, for there is an abyss between them. David Ben Moshe's death is meaningful, John Dawson's is not. David is a hero, John a victim. For 20 minutes, Alana went on talking. The last part of her broadcast was dedicated exclusively to John Dawson. Because we had... We got to mute.
All right. I'll talk to you later.
Okay.
Sorry.
Just call me when you're done.
All right. So, sorry. I knew neither David nor John, but I felt bound to them and their fates. It flashed across my mind that in speaking of John Dawson's imminent death, Alana was speaking of me also, since I was his killer. Who was to kill David Ben Moshe? For a moment, I had the impression that I was to kill both of them and all other Johns and Davids on the earth. I was the executioner, and I was 18 years old. 18 years of searching and suffering, of study and rebellion, and they all added up to this. I wanted to understand the pure, unadulterated essence of human nature, the path to the understanding of man. I had sought after the truth, and here I was about to become a killer, a participant in the work of death and God. I went over to the mirror hanging on the wall and looked into my face. I almost cried out, for everywhere I saw my own eyes. As a child, I was afraid of death. I was not afraid to die, but every time I thought of death, I shuddered. Death, Kalman, the grizzled master, told me, is being without arms or legs or mouth or head. It's all eyes. If ever you meet a creature with eyes everywhere, you can be sure that it is death. Gad was still leaning over the radio. Look at me, I said, but he did not hear. John Dawson, you have a mother, Alana was saying. At this hour she must be crying, or eating her heart out in silent despair. She will not go to bed tonight. She will sit in a chair near the window, watch in hand, waiting for dawn. Her heart will skip a beat when yours stops beating forever. They've killed my son, she will say, those murderers. But we are not murderers, Mrs. Dawson. Look at me, Gad, I repeated. He raised his eyes, shot me a glance, shrugged his shoulders, and went back to the voice of Alana. Gad doesn't know that I am death, I thought to myself, but John Dawson's mother, sitting near the window of her London flat, must surely know. She's gazing out into the night, and the night has 1,000 eyes, which are mine. No, Mrs. Dawson, we are not murderers. Your cabinet ministers are murderers. They are responsible for the death of your son. We should have preferred to receive him as a brother, to offer him bread and milk, and show him the beauties of our country. But your government made him our enemy, and by the same token signed his death warrant. No, we are not murderers. I buried my head in my hands. The child outside has stopped crying. That concludes chapter 2.